And for those of you that were with us on Palm Sunday, you'll remember that I read the entirety of the Passion, or my version of it, from Mark's Gospel. Everything tracing the events from the Last Supper to the garden, to the arrest and trial, being confronted by Pilate, finally to the crucifixion, and as far as being laid in the tomb by Joseph of Arimathea. So I'm going to spare you the reading of John's 2 chapters on the gospel, because today is about one thing and one thing only. Again, this is the Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to St. John. So they took Jesus, and carrying the cross by himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with 2 others, one on either side, with Jesus between them. Pilate also had an inscription written and put on the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." And then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. After this, when Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, in order to fulfill the scripture, "I am thirsty." A jar full of sour wine was standing there, so they put a sponge full of the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is finished." And then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. The Gospel of the Lord. So I mentioned that today is about one thing and one thing only. It's about the cross. It's about the crucifixion. And for those of you that are here in the sanctuary and watching at home, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for not going to Easter too quickly. Thank you for not walking by the cross. Thank you for observing it. We come today to remember the cross. And I suppose that the danger of the cross is its domestication. And if any is guilty of domesticating the cross, it is moi. Having fashioned a number of wooden crosses myself and being careful about the craftsmanship, we're all aware that the cross has been embellished. Many of you have worn crosses as decorative jewelry. We've all seen magnificent crosses of silver and gold, placed them in our homes, hung them from our rearview mirrors, gazed on them from afar, seen them in every shape and configuration imaginable, and it's become domesticated. It's hard to imagine how brutal crucifixion really was and how effective. I mean, if you wanted a very quick study in what would happen if you stood up against the Roman Empire, all you'd have to do is to see one crucifixion. I remember once listening to a psychiatrist talk about trauma. He was an expert in trauma. Children who had been traumatized, women traumatized, men traumatized. I can't remember the first time I heard the expression post-traumatic stress syndrome. I think it's because so many people my age were coming back from Vietnam different. First time I ever heard the word flashback. And the psychiatrist said, if one of us here had ever seen a crucifixion, you'd never sleep again. It would be a recurring nightmare that just wouldn't go away. It is probably, and certainly at the time, the most brutal form of execution known at that time on the planet. It was designed to last a long time. And not only that, not only to be excruciatingly painful, that's where, by the way, we get the expression, but to last as long as a human being could possibly endure it. And so we have these crucifixes. You'll see them very prominently displayed in Roman Catholic churches of a bloody Jesus. But, you know, even then, he's got a loincloth on. And what's not to be mistaken about the cross is the humiliation. It's not as though he was elevated and far away. Crucified people were generally about 2 or 3 feet off the ground. And so, people who were in proximity could really see what was going on and smell what was going on, because we all know what happens to intestinal functions when the human being is driven to those kind of extremes. This is not pretty. This is not pretty. This is painful. This is humiliating. And this is the worst of what humanity is capable of. And so we come to confront it. This is what we do to love all the time. We crucify it. And at our worst, we do it in a painful way. So what does the cross mean? Well, depends on who you ask. And there's no shortage of responses of what people really think and feel that the cross means. And the only thing I can say is that the older I get, the less I know, and the more mysterious that it becomes. But there are a couple of people that have reflected on the cross, and I'd like to share with them what they've said, because they say what I'd like to say if I could say it as well as they've said it. And the first is from an Episcopalian priest who is a woman, and she's a pastor in Palo Alto, and she's very prominent in the Episcopal Church, and her thinking is very prominent. But she has reflected on Good Friday, and I'd like to share, her name is Debbie Thomas, and I'd like to share her reflection on Good Friday with you, because this is what I'd like to be able to say if I could say it as well as she said it. But for those of us who have grown up in the faith, I fear that the actual scandal and strangeness of the death of Jesus has perhaps long ago faded away. Do we know anymore which Jesus we want to see? Do we know we're used to worshiping in front of a crucifix? We cross ourselves without thinking, or wear tiny replicas of a cross around our neck, or display them in our home. But what would happen, I wonder, if we could shake ourselves out of our familiarity for just a few minutes and see with new eyes what really happened on Good Friday? God died. Jesus willingly took the violence, the contempt, and the hatred of this world and absorbed it all into his body. He chose to be the victim, the scapegoat, the sacrifice. He refused to waver in his message of universal love, grace, and liberation, knowing full well that that message would cost him his life. He declared solidarity for all time with anyone who is abandoned, colonized, oppressed, accused, imprisoned, beaten, mocked, humiliated, and murdered. He burst open like a seed so that new life would grow and replenish the earth. He took a brutal instrument of torture and turned it into a vehicle of hospitality and communion for all people, everywhere. He loved, and he loved, and he loved, all the way to the end. He was the one that said, "When I am lifted up, I will draw all people to myself." Not bad. Not bad for an Episcopalian. So the second reflection is by a theologian, a Dominican theologian, Roman Catholic theologian, British theologian. His name is James Allison, spelled with one L, A-L-I-S-O-N. Jesus went to death as a victim. And the reason that this is important is that it catches us at our worst, as it were. The space of a victim is the kind of place none of us ever really wants to occupy. And if we find ourselves occupying it, it's only by kicking and screaming. More to the point, we spend a great deal of time pointing fingers and make sure that other people get to occupy that space and not us. Now, by going into and occupying the space of the victim deliberately, without any attraction to it, he is not only proving that we needn't be afraid of death, but also we needn't be afraid of shame, disgrace, or the fact that we have treated others to shame and disgrace. It is as if he were saying, yes, you did this to me, as you do it to each other. And here I am, undergoing this, occupying the space of it happening. But I'm doing so without being embittered or resentful. In fact, I was keen to occupy this space so as to try to get across to you that I am not only utterly alive, but that I am utterly loving. There is nothing you can do, no amount of evil that you can do to each other that will be able to stop my loving you. Nothing you can do to separate yourselves from me. The moment you perceive me just here on the cross, occupying this space for you and detoxifying it, the moment you perceive that, then you know that I am determined to show you that I love you and am in your midst as your forgiving victim. This is how I prove my love to you, by taking you at your very lowest and very worst point and saying, yes, you do this to me, but I'm not concerned about that. Let's see whether we can't learn a new way of being together. Pretty good, huh? Not bad for a Roman Catholic. So several years ago, you remember I took a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and the high point really of Christians in the Holy Land is walking the way of the cross, which brings you to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the epicenter of Christianity. Golgotha is there. The cenacle is there where he rose from. It's all there. Throngs of people coming and going, praying, singing, worshiping, crying. Amazing, diverse slice of humanity, of Christianity. And while we were there, our guide, Father Andrew Mays, took us off to the side, and there was like a little, it wasn't like a little cupola almost. There were several columns and sort of an enclosed area, and he gathered us. There were, I don't know, maybe 10 or so, maybe 12. And he said, this space where you are standing now commemorates the place where the mother of Jesus stood with Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Clopas, to watch the crucifixion. And when he said that, it was one of those moments that I felt a bolt of electricity run through my body. Bam! It just, the reality of it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I tried to imagine somebody's mother watching her son be crucified and what that would be like. Not sure that I got close, but it was sobering. It was sobering and continues in my life to be a great mystery. Why did arguably one of the finest human beings that ever hit the planet had to die in the most unimaginably creative, worst way that he could have died? A great paradox. And it just points to a series of mystery that I have not begun to unravel. And as I said earlier, the older I get, the more unraveled it's become. But I do know one thing. Without Good Friday, there's no Easter. There's no Easter. You have to go to the cross first. And so, again, thank you for having the courage to come today and to ponder and venerate what happened that day on that cross. And not what does it mean, but what does it mean to you?
Contributions to St. Luke's Episcopal Church help to make the digital ministry and other outreach within the community possible. If it is in your heart to make a donation, St. Luke's secure PayPal link, as well as the church's mailing information, may be found in the description of this video. Thank you.